to SOS free recipes. Today we're going to make a rosemary white bean and potato soup, and on top of that we're then also going to make a pesto that's made with sunflower seeds and spinach. So first thing we need to do is get some potatoes. You'll want to wash these and then peel them. I actually think that these probably could have been left with the peels on, and that would have tasted just fine, but we definitely went ahead and peeled these for this particular recipe. The potatoes are just straight up regular russet potatoes. They actually turned out really creamy in this recipe, so I don't think that you would need to use something like a Yukon Gold, but you definitely could use a Yukon Gold. And this recipe actually would be fine with the little baby red potatoes too. And those you could definitely leave the skin on because they're nice and tender when they get cooked. So I have 4 relatively large potatoes here, and I'm going to just go ahead and peel the skin off of all of them. Clean them up a little bit, and 1 more potato, and when we're done with that we're going to go ahead and get them chopped up. So I didn't mention it, but just to let you know, also the recipe calls from the Plant Strong Vegan, and I will definitely put that in the recipe area below. So here we're going to just chop up the potatoes, and if you have a nasty potato like I do, just get rid of that part and use the rest. That's totally fine. So we're going to actually cut these in half, and then cut those halves in half, and then just chop them into little pieces. They don't have to be super small because you're going to end up blending most of them. So after we cook them, we're going to actually blend them with an immersion blender. Not all of the little potato chunks get blended in though. If you want to leave some parts a little bit larger, you certainly can. So as you can see, I am going to be chopping up these potatoes here, and it actually calls for, the recipe originally calls for 3 cups of russet potatoes peeled and diced, and I end up, actually I will show you here in a little bit, I end up with a good solid 4 cups. So I just increase a few of the other things that are in the recipe to accommodate that, but a little bit extra soup, it goes a long way in our house. We'll eat it, it won't be an issue. So again, just chop these into what you would consider a bite-sized piece, and then you would like to, because they're going to be, like I said, they're going to be blended, but if you come across a chunk, you don't want it to be so large that you can't quite chew it as well as you'd like to. So that is a full 4 cups. It's probably closer to like 4.5 cups. The next thing that we want to do is get an onion, and the recipe calls for 1 cup of yellow onion diced. So I'm going to go ahead and take this onion and I'm going to dice it into small pieces, and I actually will end up cooking it along with the potato. My cutting board is slippery when it's wet, you could see that. So it doesn't, again, have to be in teeny tiny little pieces. I probably made this a little bit smaller than I even needed to. I decided that the amount of onion that I had just wasn't quite enough, so I decided to use probably about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of an onion here, and just chopped it up and left it in a nice little pile on my cutting board till I needed it. So there you go. You can see that's probably a good 5 cups. And now what I have are 2 cans of cannellini beans that I rinsed very, very well to make sure there's no salt left on them and no goo. Obviously we need some garlic. Can't have soup without garlic. And you're supposed to use rosemary, and this is all that I have. I always take my rosemary leaves and put them through a coffee grinder so that they're smaller and not so stick-like. This part is where we're going to work on making our pesto. So we need 3/4 of a cup of the spinach leaves. And now the original recipe, as you can see, says that it calls for kale, but it also says that you can use spinach. Well, I always have spinach on hand, so that's what I'm going to go with. Besides the fact that I like it better. Kale seems to be a little bit bitter to me. I don't particularly enjoy it very much, to be honest with you. So really, really, really full 3/4 of a cup. Pack it in there as best as you can. So the next thing, these are raw, unsalted sunflower seeds. Obviously I buy the organic kind. If you can, you can. If you can't find them, that's fine too. And again, we're going to just use our 3/4 of a cup measuring device here and measure out the amount that we need. So there goes 3/4 of a cup of that. And I do have to say, I made half the recipe for the pesto because I wasn't really sure if it was going to be awesome or not. So when you look at the recipe, it says use 1 1/4 cups of kale, 1 1/2 cups of sunflower seeds. I just went ahead and approximately cut this in half because I didn't want to try to have too much of it in case it just wasn't super awesome. And I have to say, it was super awesome. So go ahead and make the full recipe if you want to. So we need a couple more things for this recipe. We're also going to need to have some water and some lemon, some garlic. So here's the, oh, you're supposed to use lemon juice. I didn't have any, so I used lime juice. So I used 2 tablespoons of lime juice. The original recipe calls for the whole amount to be 1 lemon juiced. And so I looked up online and it said that that would be approximately 4 tablespoons, so half of a lemon would have been 2. So some garlic. It just calls for 1 clove of garlic. I put a teaspoon in. I know half a teaspoon is a clove, but I like garlic. I like the way it tastes, so I just went ahead and put a teaspoon in. So one of the other ingredients is nutritional yeast. We do buy ours fortified. I know you're not supposed to. The folic acid maybe is not good for you, but this is the kind I can find and we like it. It says to use 1 1/2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, and that's for the whole recipe. So the half recipe would have only been like 3/4 of a tablespoon, but yeah, I just shook it in there. We like nutritional yeast in our house, so it's not going to hurt anything. So the next thing that we need is some water so that we can thin this out. And just so that you know, it does say in the recipe to use some shallots. I actually didn't have any, so I didn't use any. We're going to go and blend this up and make it nice and creamy. So here we go with the Nutribullet. Make sure that lid is on there really tight because it spins pretty heavy with the sunflower seeds at the bottom there. Not as bad as frozen mangoes do, but... And then you actually want to let this go for a little bit because those sunflower seeds really do need to get completely blended. Mine was still a little tiny bit chunky at the end, but it actually was fine. It tasted just fine, so I didn't really care. I didn't feel the need to reblend it. But when you look at it, you can see the sides of the container. They're a little bit chunky looking still. But again, it was absolutely fine tasting the way that it was. So of course, gotta have a little taste test. There's some green goo. And really guys, this stuff was really delicious. It was super yummy. Super yummy. Highly recommend using that pesto. So what I did was I boiled the potatoes and the onions together at the same time. And I'm going to add probably about 3/4 of the beans. And then we're going to want to mash them. So I left some water that I had boiled the potatoes with, excuse me, in the pot. So you want to go ahead and do that. That's totally fine. And then we will actually add a little bit more water as needed. So here goes a tablespoon of the garlic. That was a heaping tablespoon, guys. But as I said, I love garlic. Can't go wrong. We'll use it in anything and everything I have. And here's where the rest of the rosemary. I would have actually put more rosemary in here, guys, if I'd had more. That was all I had, so that's what I used. Organic, unsweetened soy milk. Now that is my 3/4 of a cup, but you want to use twice that amount. So we're going to use 1.5 cups. And I have the hardest time getting this to pour correctly. It always wants to just come flying out the end at me and do that. Just go blub, 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 blub all over the place. So anyway, this is me attempting to nicely and neatly get 1.5 cups of soy milk. Now the recipe does also say that you can put some vegan chicken bouillon in here if you would like to, and I would like to, but it is definitely not salt-free then, so we did not. But if you are not salt-free, I would highly recommend it. It would definitely add a nice flavor. So here's where we go through and just use an immersion blender. I know it's kind of hard with the light for you guys to see. I apologize for that. But go through and blend it as best as you can. You don't have to blend it until completely smooth. So you have a little bit of some potato chunks left here and there. And that is why we didn't put all of the beans in. We wanted to be able to have a little bit of chunk here and there in the soup so it's not just completely creamy. And again, the original recipe calls for shallots to have been made with this as well, and I didn't do that because I didn't have any, and I almost never use shallots just because I would rather just toss an onion in because I always have those in the house. One thing I would highly recommend is putting some salt in this. The original recipe does call for salt and pepper, and I did not have any pepper out, so I forgot to put it in there. So we are done with the immersion blender, and now we're going to go ahead and put the rest of our beans in the soup. Of course, I have to show you what it looks like. It's a little bit chunky, not too bad. And there go the beans. So we'll mix those in and we'll put this in a bowl. Doesn't that look beautiful? A few little beans and some soup along with the sunflower pesto. Alrighty, so here we go. We're going to do a taste test on the soup. I've got a little bit of a potato chunk on here. You can see an onion, you can see a bean, and some of the green pesto. Well, there goes the bean. Some of the green pesto-y sauce stuff that's a little bit limey, but very good. Definitely can tell you it's a very mild flavor, but it's very good. I definitely will eat this. It's very good. In the recipe, it does say that you could put a little bit of vegan bouillon in here to probably spice things up a little bit, and that would add quite a bit to it, obviously. But this is definitely SOS free and edible. Highly recommend it. You guys should give this one a try.